What's up everyone, Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another album review for you. So another one that came out on the 11th of March was the newest album from Konvent, Call Down the Sun. This comes out on Napalm Records. This band formed in Denmark in 2015, and this is death doom, or at least kind of death doom. At least that's kind of where they fit in. I don't know. I've been listening to this band for a while. I picked up their first album. I thought it was really good. Very slow, plodding, chuggy death doom. And this one kind of takes an interesting turn in terms of their approach to it. And almost to the point where I don't know if it's actually death doom anymore, but it's definitely heavy. And I don't know, it's definitely an interesting mix of things. As soon as this album started with the opening track, Into the Distance, I noticed something very different. The guitar tone is not exactly one I would associate with death doom per se, like more along the lines of stoner doom. Like this sounds like it belongs on a Sleep album or a Monolord album. It's very warm and very fuzzy, and then backed by this gigantic fuzzy bass. And having this warm tone here versus their first album, which Puritan Masochism was very heavy, very chunky, very thick. And honestly on this, I get a fierce, like, heavy desert rock vibe. Again, kind of back to like Caius and Sleep again. The next track is actually called Sand is King, and it pretty much moves like sand slowly blowing through the desert. The whole pace of this album is very slow, like almost kind of a funeral doom pace, or again, like stoner doom. It really doesn't pick up the pace much until you hit the song Grains, and then later in the album, Pipe Dreams, where it kind of picks it up to at least a more mid-tempo stomp, but most of this is slow, plodding, like trying to walk through cement. Well, this is the desert, so walking through wet sand, I guess? I don't know, this kind of, again, has that light, airy feel, and I feel like I'm going to be bringing up the desert a lot because that is the feel on this. Like, I feel in between these albums, they jammed a lot of Matt Pike stuff, and I was like, dude, I love his tone, and I fucking get it, because it's awesome. But it really changes the dynamic on this album a lot from the first one, and kind of isolates the one thing on here that makes this death doom, which is their frontwoman. Her vocals are just beastly, like very low, kind of cavernous roars. There's a nice amount of reverb on them, and then she breaks into these blackened shrieks. At times, this kind of reminds me a lot of a band like Churchburn, just in terms of like a blackened sludge. But this stays in a very slow pace pretty much at all times. Like, this doesn't break into blast beats at any point. Hell, this doesn't even break into a D beat. This stays, again, funeral doom slow throughout the entire thing, and kind of just lets the whole album get carried by these big, droning, kind of monotonous riffs, and kind of just letting them echo out into the where the fuck ever they are. Again, probably the desert. I don't know. No, they're from Denmark. There's no deserts there. Anyway, this sounds like it was written in the desert. Now, I don't think the vocals would feel as much as though they're on an island, it's probably a desert island, if it wasn't for the riffing itself. The riffing itself is not very death metal-ish. In fact, I don't think there's really a lot of riffs on here that scream death doom. Like, there's nothing on here that reminds me of Hooded Menace, or like, you know, a giant breakdown in an incantation song. Most of it is very Sabbathy, very slow, and again, the pace of the riffing, like there's not a lot of like palm muted chugs or anything like that. It's just big stoner droning riffs with a little bit of like a Middle Eastern touch, especially in the song Fata Morgana, which is just a fun word to say. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of fun to say. And it does have a really interesting atmosphere, again, with these really just harsh, brutal vocals. There's nothing clean about any of the vocals, but this sort of, I don't know, kind of soothing desert rock, desert metal vibe. It has this really interesting contrast, and I like the whole vibe and sound of this album. In fact, the production here is great. The guitars are, again, very lush, very fuzzy. Not what I expected, but still really good sounding, and that warm bass and those pummeling drums, especially that ridiculously massive snare, it all sounds really good. But again, there's not a tremolo riff in sight. There's not a lot of like death metal harmonies or anything on here. There's, again, not like really any sort of death metal chugging at all. It's all very slow stoner doom. And after a while, it kind of started to drag. The whole middle of this album could almost constitute one song. Well, Fata Morgana brought in some really cool Middle Eastern melodies that were kind of peppered in there and kind of spiced up a little bit. And you do get occasional samples to sort of, break it up. I don't know what they're saying. It's kind of muffled by big fuzzy tone. But it kind of started to drag because almost every song in here has the same pace. Like, the metronome is set on one thing and they did not fuck with it one bit. And pretty much from the tracks Grains to Never Rest, it is like one long stoner metal jam. Like a shorter condensed version of Dope Smoker, just kind of all huddled in the middle there. And it was at this point in the record that I pretty much noticed that if you remove the vocals or just change them all to clean singing or sort of like, again, like a stoner doom sort of delivery, you would have a stoner doom album. Like, there's not enough death metal or death metal influence on this album to really constitute death doom without her vocals. Her vocals are probably the most death doom thing about this, or at least death-ish thing about this, because there's plenty of fucking doom. It's just not a lot of death. And this became kind of hard to actually write notes about because I was literally writing the same thing about all these songs in the middle, because they showed off every dynamic that was going to be in the middle of the album very early on in the album, and it really doesn't change from there. In fact, the riffs become kind of indistinguishable because they're kind of doing the same thing. Like, again, very Sabbathy riffs, but it's all at the same pace, kind of the same meter, and there's not enough vocal variety to kind of spice this up. Like, if there was a clean passage on here, that might be something that stands out, but it's just kind of the same droning riffs. And while they are good, and I do like droning stuff, I kind of signed up for death doom on this because at least that is what this band is portrayed as. And the first album definitely had a bit more of a death metal influence. And honestly, it wasn't until the end of this album where there was a break in the monotony. Pipe Dreams is a little bit more up-tempo. It's a little bit more of a rocker. It kind of injects some energy into this very tired, sort of dragging its feet, sort of middle part of this album. And then the last song, Harena, actually shows off a bunch of stuff that I feel like should have been on the rest of the album. You actually have dissonant lead melodies on top of the droning tones. It kind of expands it out. It makes it a little bit more like cold, but spacey cold. And there's actual like lead melodies, like kind of not necessarily a solo, but a lead melody to kind of accompany the main droning riff, which after a while I was kind of getting tired of just hearing a lot of the same droning riffs. Granted, the tone's fucking wonderful. It's just there's not a lot of variety in the riffs that are writing on here. And they even pepper in some strings towards the end, which occasionally you get some weird thing that only kind of pops up in one song, like Fata Morgana. I still like saying that word. Towards the end, there's some, I guess, gang vocals or gang chants. Like, it's definitely not all just the front woman. Some other people are yelling in there. But it kind of lifts the song up, or at least caught my attention because I was being, droned to death at that point. But Harena became my favorite song on here just because it kind of opened the door a little bit. And it sucks because it came at the end. Now, granted, I like a great closer, but there were, again, dynamics and stuff that I think should have been on the rest of the album to really open it up, instead of just kind of laboring this droning tone and this lumbering pace the entire time with very little variety in the riffs. And unfortunately, that kind of makes this album feel a lot longer than it actually is, because I believe this is only around like 45 minutes, but I swear I was listening to this for like 2 hours. When you do one thing too much, it kind of makes it a long listen. And again, I was running out of shit to write, so this kind of just came down to me bitching a lot. At no point on this did I feel like the band was on the same page, but still what they did was enjoyable. It's just not what I thought it was going to be. So this kind of became like an exercise in patience, essentially. Like, I like what they're doing, but they're doing it too much, and it's not exactly as advertised, but I kind of like this contrast. And again, they don't sound like they're all on the same page, but I don't know, it weirdly fits together, at least on the more different songs on here, which, again, the whole middle section is almost essentially one song. Again, it's just sort of an odd listen, and again, expectations versus reality kind of made this a weird affair to listen to. But overall, I'm going to give this 2.5. I don't think it's necessarily great, and I think it does one thing way too much. And again, if this is going to be Death Doom, I think there has to be more death than just the vocals on here. Again, she kind of sounds like she's doing her own thing while the rest of the band is doing their own thing, and they just kind of put it together. There needs to be a little bit more death metal influence, unless they're going to change directions and go completely stoner doom, which honestly, if they had cleaner vocals with maybe like an occasional harsh bit on there, this might actually work a little bit more. But this became just sort of a head scratcher and a very long, drawn-out album. I definitely had some higher expectations considering I liked the debut. I didn't think it was like the greatest thing in the world, but I thought it was really good and it showed a lot of promise. This kind of took a weird turn, I guess, somewhere in the studio or in the process of writing this, and they came up with a very different album that doesn't necessarily gel very well, but honestly, it's still kind of cool to listen to. And again, I love the production. I love the tone. It's just, it doesn't necessarily gel. And that was like the big thing on it. At no point did this feel like the band was on the same page. But I still think this band shows a lot of promise. And honestly, this is one I can recommend to, stoner and doom metal fans that aren't necessarily the biggest death metal fans. You're going to get all those killer riffs. You're just going to get some death metal vocals with it. And if you can get used to death metal vocals, check out some Death Doom. It's pretty good. This, I don't know if I would call Death Doom, but I still recommend you check it out. Form your own opinion. There's a lot of parts that I think are really good. They just happen too damn much. And if you're already a fan of this band, I recommend you also go out and check this one out. It is different, but it's still pretty decent. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you would like to help us out there, there'll be a link down below. There will also be a link to our giveaway, which we are fast approaching 10,000 subscribers, and when we hit that, we will be giving away an Alien Weaponry vinyl. It's a limited print on an ocean blue color. It's pretty cool. I like it. We'll also be giving away one of our shirts, which if you would like one of your own, there will be a link down there to thrallsmetal.com where you can order your own. And we'll be throwing in a $100 gift card to Bandcamp, which we encourage you to spend on Friday so you can support the bands. But yeah, fast approaching. We are less than 20 away. Thank you all so damn much. This has been absolutely amazing. We love the community we built here. This has been fucking boatloads of fun. It's been great running into you guys at shows too in the Ohio area. And yeah, we look forward to fucking cranking out more of this stuff. So once again, thank you all very much, and we will catch you later.